Everyone eats out, but people often miss how the food arrives on their plate. Every meal has a story of growers, suppliers, founders, and operators making it all happen. Welcome to Grounded. I'm Lauren Mitchell, and each week I will bring you conversation with the amazing people behind the brands you know and the ones you'll want to know. Grounded is powered by the Buyer's Edge platform, the leading food service digital procurement network, powered by data, software, and collaborative relationships. Let's get grounded. Welcome, grounded listeners, to our Supply Chain Expert Exchange Recap panel. This afternoon, I am joined by 5 amazing leaders who each brought unique perspectives to this year's event. Whether you attended and want to revisit some of the big takeaways, or you're tuning in to get a feel for what the exchange is all about, this conversation will give you a front row seat to the ideas and energy that made it such a success. So let's get started with a quick round of introductions. Jen Silveira, Vice President of Supply Chain with CAVA, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lauren. So I've been at CAVA now. I'll hit my 3-year anniversary on January 30th. So super excited about that. And in terms of shows that I attend, I will say that I'll show my age here, but I absolutely love the Supply Chain Expert Exchange. And I attended my first one in 1998. It had a different name back then, but believe it or not, I actually brought my 3-month-old son with me to the 1999 one. I made my husband drag him there because I couldn't leave him. So that's, again, I'm dating myself, but I absolutely love the Expert Exchange. I always go every May in conjunction with NRA. And then now I also go in the fall in conjunction with Market Vision. Those are my 2 must-haves for multiple reasons, but really it's just about the connections more than anything. You know, at my level, it's not so much about sourcing or the tactical, but it's so much that I learn from my peers. And so those are my 2 must every year. And then, of course, there's a lot of other travel that happens, but Women's Food Service Forum is also one that's really important to me, but I go that probably every other year. So yeah, those are my go-tos.
So what Jen, first of all, I love how you brought in your child just to make it work. As working moms, I think we can all relate to managing that, especially in the early years. That says a lot for how much value you find in the show. For those that aren't familiar, the same show is in May as part of the Chicago's NRA, and then also in Orlando in the fall. And we want to start off just by asking that essentially what Jen covered is why do you choose this show, leaders on the call today, but also what others do you find most valuable to go throughout the year? And how does this one stand out? How about, Jen, if you don't mind sharing, is there a specific memorable part of this year's exchange since you've been to so many that stood out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. This year for sure, the EPR discussion was just really it jumped out at me. My director of sourcing and sustainability was with me, and we literally looked at each other and started texting and saying, "Oh my God, like we need to get on this now." I think a lot of the operators felt that way. There was definitely a sense in that audience of like stress, confusion. We'll get into it more, I guess, when we talk later, but there's a lot there. And it was on my radar, but that really brought it home that we needed to take it very seriously. And we've already had actually a working group session. So that was just the biggest, most memorable and, meaningful thing for me of the show.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you talk about that section. It was a very powerful piece from speaker Chloe in that section. So that's exactly why we're meeting here today, is just to kind of hear some of those key insights. Kudos to the supply chain expert team that actually put together the topics and the speakers. I found Joel with Inspire Brands. His piece was absolutely phenomenal too.
Oh.
So it was a really, really great group of speakers. Owen, Brady, let's go to you next. Thank you so much for coming on. Owen is the Executive Vice President of the BEP Fresh Division. How about you? You've been to a ton of shows. Talk to us about the ones that you typically attend in a year and what makes this one stand out to you.
Yeah, like Jen, maybe not as long as Jen, but been going to the NRA's Supply Chain Expert Exchange for many years now, and that is one that really stands out. But throughout a year, I typically attend IFPA in Monterey for the produce vertical. That's one that I find very valuable. NRA show in Chicago, I go to every year. and then Market Vision in Orlando to get my a little bit of a commodity update. But the NRA Supply Chain Expert Exchange is one that I hit both at Orlando and in Chicago, and for a lot of the reasons Jen said already. It brings together that full ecosystem of distributors, manufacturers, and educators, which is unique. You don't often get that kind of balance and candor in one small, kind of tight knit group. So that is the Expert Exchange is definitely on my list to attend twice a year.
Love it. How about what was the most productive part of this year's show for you?
Well, I'm a little biased. Logistics and distribution is really my background. So, Dr. Caplis's session on logistics was by far my favorite. I've also had the pleasure of taking a course with him. So having the educational piece and the sort of with the real life and balancing the two, he has a unique way of taking these complex logistics
Yeah.
issues and simplifying them for the group. So that session to me, I was able to bring a lot of takeaways from it, was really the standout for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Owen. Completely agreed on just the intimate nature of supply chain expert exchange. Adam Hing with the director of supply chain with Noodles and Company. Thanks so much for joining us. How about you? What shows do you attend in the year and why this one?
I attend NRA. I probably think that's the most beneficial for me as a strategic role of sourcing. As I manage both food and non-food categories, and
Mm,
so it's really encompassing all the different variations of supply chain that I have to cover and responsibilities for. But also the supply chain expert exchange is also really, really great because I think one, it's the networking part with professionals in the industry. I find that to be irreplaceable in value, being able to soundboard off of people that do the same job in different components, but basically have the same area of responsibilities. And so there's some comfort in knowing that um, there's people that are experiencing the same opportunities I may have in the organization, and some of the same challenges similar to the conversations around packaging. So.
absolutely. And finally, Sara Burnett, the Senior Director of Supply Chain for Tropical Smoothie Cafe. Loved working alongside you for many years, Sara. Thank you so much for joining. How
Thank
about you? What are your shows that you attend and
you.
why?
Oh man, I'm pretty similar to Owen. I'm and the rest of the group, NRA annually, as well as the Supply Chain Expert Exchange, both in the spring and fall. Market Vision, the Dot Show, that is something
Uh,
that both myself and cross-functional team attend annually. IFPA, I manage produce, similar to Alan, both food and non-food items. So produce falls under my purview. So we go out to Monterey every year for that. And then some other smaller annual conferences we attend, Kinetic 12, um, Food Ovations from an innovation perspective. So my team oversees product development from a supply chain perspective. So Food Ovations is a big one that we try to hit annually.
It's awesome.
And then, yeah.
How about most memorable or productive part of the show for you this year?
Boy, so I think it's very similar to everybody. I thought Dr. Kaplan's presentation on freight was probably one of the best I've ever seen.
Mm,
The way he can take something so complex and make it relative relative to everybody in layman's terms was quite a skill set. It was so impactful to me that I went to his website. I'm now a newsletter member of the MIT Freight Lab, so I left there. I left there knowing more, learning more, and wanting to learn more on that. So it was highly valuable, as well as the hot topics and emerging issues session with Christy and Jeff. I thought that was a really cool way of kind of engaging the group on what's going on, what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and getting everybody's
mm,
feedback. Those were two really impactful areas.
awesome. Michelle, Vice President of Supply Chain with Metro Diner. We've got you joining us. And maybe you can give a highlight. You are speaking from bias now, a board member for the Supply Chain Expert Exchange. But what shows do you typically attend and why this one?
I would definitely echo what these guys have said. I see a lot of them at them. Market Vision is a never miss. I love that for a commodity update, especially going into end of year contracts. Dot Innovations is great. I go with our R&D director, so that's great for sourcing and what's coming up in trends. And then, of course, our supply chain expert exchange is fantastic for networking and just getting what's relevant into what's happening in the industry and collaborating with others. I guess let me say that that is why it stands out to me is it's planned by supply chain leaders. So I think that's
Yeah.
what is so unique about it is it's so timely. It's not, not planned out a year in advance and kind of lost. So being so timely. And you have everyone from CEOs to presidents to coordinators in the room. So you get to see all kind of walks of life, big and small, collaborating with one another and problem solving. So it's more like a think tank than a conference, which I think is just, it makes it stand out.
I agree. I think it's so fun. I work so much one-on-one with these different leaders, be it the founders or presidents or directors of supply chain, but then to kind of back out of the actual brand and just see them in a networking function. But then the roundtables, and we'll get into that with you in a couple minutes here, but actually breaking out topics, 25 different topics, different tables, and putting different brands or suppliers together to problem solve real issues. I agree. These topics aren't planned a year out. They are very relevant, real time topics, and definitely has been my favorite part in attending the conference or those breakout sessions.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback there a little bit. I think one of the things that I love as well is the diversity of thought in the room. It's not just supply chain professionals. Michelle, you just said it. There's CFOs, there are COOs. So it's broader than just supply chain professionals in the room. And that's a lot of interesting topics when you're on these roundtables, seeing it from, culinary's perspective or a CFO's perspective as you're talking through the topic. So the diversity of thought in this room is really good.
All right, so we're going to go through individual by individual here. And again, in the spirit of those that either attended but had to step out for a few moments or wanted to attend but couldn't, really just ask these individuals, pick a portion of the show that you felt was particularly relevant and powerful for you. The topic that you were texting mid-talk back to your colleagues to say, hey, let's do this, let's do that. And really just kind of unpack it for just a couple minutes. So I want to start with Jen, and in specific, the topic that Chloe Kapanen spoke on around just environmental, social, and governance responsibilities. If you don't mind just giving the listeners who perhaps didn't have a chance to attend, essentially what was covered there and what was most impactful for you.
Sure. Yeah. Again, for me, it really stood out. They dove pretty quickly into the EPR discussion, and for those who may not know EPR, that's extended producer responsibility, specific to packaging. So essentially, it's taking the responsibility for recycling away from the consumer and taxpayers or government and putting it into the producers or sellers of the packaging. So I, this all comes full circle. I hosted a roundtable on packaging actually at the Expert Exchange in May, and this came up a lot in the three different tables that I hosted. But very, in a small way, people started like, "Well, this is a little scary." We didn't really get deep into it. So again, when she gave this presentation, it was really fascinating to understand really, again, how it's still so uncertain and how it's going to impact us. So at CAVA, sustainability is huge for us. We just released our first impact report in July, which was centered around our mission of heart health and humanity, bringing heart health and humanity to food. And so we're always looking for ways of how do we work with our farmers to be more sustainable, and all of our packaging is sustainable. That was one of our major initiatives and milestones that we hit. So this is something that not only could be it's needed, but it could be a financial hit to our companies and to a lot of companies. So there's a lot here to unpack. So they tried to break it down and give us the steps that would be needed in terms of registering. It varies by state. Again, there's so many components that make it challenging, right? But more than anything, it was great to have some resources that they called out. They have a website specifically that you can go to and take a little 4-hour course, which I believe our legal team is going to do actually. So we immediately went back and went to our legal team and said, guys, this is a compliance issue. We need your help right away. And so we now have a working group. So that was just really, really valuable. Again, for us personally, it probably wouldn't have become such a priority if I hadn't been at this show and really heard firsthand that we need to get our arms around this.
That's amazing. I will include that website in our show notes as well. But I think, yeah, there's so many complexities to it that each state is operating in different timing, and how I think it's a great example of just another element to supply chain management that you kind of just have to learn in real time, just like managing the tariffs, right? We can't get educated ahead of time with these things. You just have to jump in and take the onus on yourself to get educated. So I love that you make the connection that due to being in this session, you were able to kind of implement some of the learnings for your team, as a result. That's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting for sure.
Awesome. All right, Owen, Brady, want to hear from you in specific about, again, we've heard a couple talk about Chris's session on freight. I too found freight can be something that a lot of our clients have a lot of questions around, and it's a very unique industry, and so it's very complex. And I'm very excited to have you just kind of cover a little bit about what he shared during that session and why it was so valuable for the listeners that were there to hear it.
Yeah, thank you. The couple key takeaways I had was he really challenged us to think about freight differently, to move behind, sort of that traditional RFP mindset, start managing it more as a portfolio and actually managing the freight. So, I think the piece that that stood out was one of the slides he put up there about freight doesn't behave like a traditional commodity. It's not the more you buy, the lower the cost. There's really no true economies of scale when it comes to freight cost. So where does the advantage come? It comes from optimizing the freight lanes and working with parties to remove friction points along the ecosystem. So to me, it's that challenging of managing freight differently. He spent time on segmenting freight. Focus on the 20% because that drives 80% of the cost of your network. So don't get lost in the tail. 20% of your lanes make up a good portion of your freight spend. So focus on those and optimizing those. So there was a lot of great takeaways, but again, the key was focus on managing it like a portfolio, spend time segmenting the freight, and ensure that you're working to optimize both loads and lanes and really working to make a frictionless, environment for the supplier, the distributor, and in ensuring that you're optimizing as you go.
Absolutely. I love the visual that he provided of whether your goods are riding via a taxi or a
Yeah.
bus.
Yeah. And again, I think that's another great takeaway, another plug, I guess, for the expert exchange is that they share all these presentations. So you can use a lot of these slides and a lot of these visuals that they give. And that one with the taxi, which is talking sort of about a milk run route versus a bus, which is a one stop to one stop route, was a good visual and made it very clear for the teams on how they perform differently.
Yeah. Awesome. Michelle, I'm going to have you cover some of the breakout sessions. These were topics that broke out across, gosh, I think there was like 20 different roundtables, from risk management to distribution to fresh supply chain, next generation, AI, just a myriad of topics. If you don't mind just covering again, what is the process to choosing those? I don't even know if you know the answer to that question. Do you reach out to the community? How do you guys decide what to go for? And then some of the takeaways that perhaps you've already received as a result. Take it either way you want, but I'm excited to have you share specifically on the roundtables.
Sure. So I'm definitely biased, but this is by far my favorite piece of it. And it is the most highly rated of the conference. Every year we put out a survey and um, we take the responses into account. And so a lot of those topics are coming from the survey. We also, you probably saw me walking around kind of almost like a paperclip of taking notes, what people are talking about, how many people are joining those tables. So for the last 3 conferences, AI has definitely been number one of what people want to talk about, want to understand. Um, everyone's kind of using it in different forms, whether it be helping with forecasting or just like ChatGPT to put a contract together. So that was a really interesting discussion, overhearing that Shan Brooks was doing, kind of who's sharing their data, who's allowed to share their data, kind of being mindful and talking through that. We also, I have worked with every single person on this podcast and have asked them for their input. Like, hey, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to hear? A lot of them have done tables, and so that has came up organically. Other topics we should add. With tariffs, being so prominent this year, that's been a table and talking through how companies are handling that, what their contracts, like how they should position their contracts and taking on those tariffs, or should they be looking outside? Another one was LTOs and like forecasting and planning LTOs. And this was a hot one this year because Crumble has joined the Supply Chain Expert Exchange for the first time this year, and they were very popular because they plan out their LTOs week by week. They have a new LTO every week, and I'm sure everyone listening has LTO planning in their some way in their day-to-day business. And if they execute the way they do, on a week by basis, I mean, there's just a lot to learn from one another from them. So I definitely talked to them after the roundtable and got their information so that we can collaborate later. So, I mean, networking is what it's all about. I always make a goal every exchange to walk away with 3 contacts. And I can't tell you how much I utilize that brochure with everyone's number in there because, 6 months down the road, if I think something's interesting at, Chili's, I have Brinker's number to contact them of like, hey, how did you do this? Those kind of things. So that's what it's all about.
Oh my goodness. They were awesome breakout sessions. There was one, I think it was table 7, accountability and action, where Mark Larson talked about measuring supplier and distributor performance. This is something that even just at Produce Alliance that we get asked all the time in terms of scorecarding distributor partners and grower partners, but understanding from different operators what metrics they value to see in that scorecard. And then there's the question of how do you measure that? And then what's the feedback loop? And how do you keep it a partnership conversation? Such awesome feedback from that table in terms of like what they use with their brands. And then those that sat there that perhaps don't have a scorecard in their system, gaining some great information toward that topic. Another table that we had was just optimizing fresh in your supply chain and what tools do you use to ensure freshness of the produce category? Where are the blind spots? So with that, I'm actually going to hand it over to Adam and talk about either insights gained at that table and some of the topics covered there, as well as maybe any other tables that you sat in as well.
Absolutely. No, I think that was probably one of the more robust tables that I was in. Was the fresh thinking and optimizing produce supply chain. And from that, I think one of the takeaways for me is the diversity of background that I have with the multiple brands that I represent, that I have a diversity of understanding how those different supply chains model into each of your companies that you work for. And specifically for me, I've been with 20 different brands. And so from that, it allowed me to open up my perspective around how to manage not only just from fresh produce, which was the table topic, but the best practices from fresh proteins, which I managed in some other brands as well. So, and there's some similarities and there's a lot of differences with it, but it's how to manage and not to be scared from it. And I think that's one of the takeaways that I was trying to articulate while we were at the table is don't be afraid of what is managing a fresh program because there is short shelf life. There's opportunities with acts of God, weather, all those different scenarios, but you're not alone when you're managing those. And then it's how you respond and then the right partners that you have to help you rebuild that supply chain that has had a gap or a lock or missing truck.
Yeah. It's so powerful just to pause and consider the question, what are the blind spots in my supply chain? Because pulling on some of those levers and leading that in the conversation with your program partner or your vendor directly will really help support some of those holes and gaps. Is just say, hey, it feels like at the receiving level, at the restaurant, back of the house, I just don't have a ton of visibility into how it's getting received and then stored in the cooler. Are there any tools that you guys utilize out there to give visibility into that process or continue the education in that process, given the turnover that happens in that part of the supply chain, right? So it was really neat
Absolutely.
to just hear different blind spots at the table too.
Yes, for sure. And how to manage that. And then even the information that comes from some of those external partners you may have as a customer base being a end user, how to utilize the resource and information around seasonal changes, farm field
Yeah.
changes, country changes, whether it's transitioning from Mexico to United States or United States back to Mexico or South America. Definitely you get to see the global entity that's around produce itself and then the challenges that come with that, but also the robust supply chain that is the communication that allows us to have that fluidity and inventory, and then for successful produce companies to be able to deliver to customers like Noodles.
Yeah. We had a younger individual at the table. I'm not going to mention the name, but she was new into the industry in terms of managing produce and is just trying to grasp some of those environmental weather market conditions and then recognizing that there is a pattern and there is a transition to lettuce twice a year, right? And so she talked about how she's using Chat GPT to actually walk through the history of her items and just kind of map it for her on a seasonal basis. And I was like, that is so cool to see a young one in action in terms of applying chat and some of these AI things to her current role to just grasp understanding around the nature of it. So, okay. Sara, you get to talk on a very interesting session. The topic was hot trends, and it was given by
Yeah.
Christy Kingery and Jeff Dorr. And I thought, as I was sitting there, how are they going to go about this? Because I feel like trends just happen so quick and then they leave so quick. So even if you prepare something in advance, but they did something unique with the time, making it very collaborative. And I'm excited just to have you share kind of how they set that session up and some of the topics that were covered there.
Yeah, so I really I'm not biased on this session at all, but I do believe and feel very passionate that it captured what the expert exchange is all about. And that is having some honest peer-to-peer insights on real challenges and solutions we're all facing out there in the industry. It was the technology piece was a really great spin on it. I think it really invigorated the audience to participate because there was this veil of anonymity, which led to, I believe, more honest and real answers because you could kind of put it up on the screen in real time. And so asking questions, having the audience respond via their phone or laptop really made the live polling a super cool function of that session, and realizing how aligned and misaligned we all are on different topics. I think the big one was AI and how people feel about AI within the industry. It is very skewed, with very surprisingly most people in our industry being a little bit more cautious to it,
Yeah.
unlike the young lady who is probably using it every day. And I think we're all kind of looking for Michelle mentioned it on the roundtables. I led a roundtable on AI year before last, and it was busy. And I think everybody's looking for that silver bullet. What is the solution? And really, everybody's different. But I think it was also interesting on how everybody was managing tariff mitigation tactics, and kind of seeing how aligned we were on pulling different levers to help mitigate the tariff impacts across our business. And as well as, no surprise here, I think we're all aligned on what our brand focuses are and prioritization and how those stack up, whether it's inventory, distribution, LTO management, and the challenges that run along with that. So it was a great session to kind of really see how your thoughts looked against everybody else's. And then ultimately, like taking that back to my team and being able to say, hey, like, have we thought about this? have we looked at it this way, and really challenging some different perspectives into the conversation.
Yeah, you said a couple awesome things there. So, for one, just the candidness from the audience and some of the free form, or what she's referencing is we used our phones as an actual live poll
Uh-huh.
during the session. And so a question was posed on the screen and we'd answer it on our cell phones. Some open ended questions posed answers like 6, 7, which we
Yeah,
got
don't
a
know what
kick
that
out
means.
of. But
I'm not
another
cool
great
enough for that.
question. Yeah. A great question for an example was we saw in the headlines that tariff impact would be around 15 to 30%. What was the net
Mhm.
effect of your finished good product increase? And just understanding that across the room, as well as from our perspective at Produce Alliance being there and hearing all the brands in one room answer this question: what is your key priority for 2026? Is it sustainability? Is it cost
Okay.
management? Is it LTOs? We want to know that, right? And so it was really cool to see, of course, for the most part, everyone's looking at the same item, cost management.
Yeah.
So loved
I
the
thought that
session, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too, because I think coming off of the sustainability session, I would have
Yeah,
seen sustainability rank higher in the
yeah,
prioritization, because
yeah,
I think we all left there a little um, concerned and
yeah,
working towards trying how we're gonna solve for this. So I do agree. I
yeah.
think there were a lot of good thought starters and questions raised to help people think a little bit differently about what's going on in our industry and within our own organizations.
All right. As we go back around here, I want to make sure I give everyone a chance to say something that perhaps still they want to mention on the event, but also just to the listener who's never been, what piece of advice would you give to them attending this conference in particular? Again, there's Chicago next May and then Orlando next fall. But go ahead and add any finishing touches to just your takeaways from the event or to that question. So, Jen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, all of us feel the same way. It's just so valuable being with our peers, but it doesn't matter what your experience level. I would say that's a big thing. Don't be intimidated if you're new to the industry. It's a very small, welcoming group, right? And I've really made an effort to I have a lot of younger team members on my team, and I make sure that I bring a few of them every time. And they're honestly, they're just like, oh my gosh, you know so many people. And, they kind of get like, almost it's weird, like almost starstruck, like because I've been doing this so long, but then they're like, everyone's so nice. And I got to know this person, or I learned this from that. And again, it doesn't matter what your level, like going back to the tables, not to completely circle back, but I just love hosting these tables because I learn something new every time. And I was doing a pretty, basic for supply chain. It was negotiation. We all negotiate, right? But it was really cool to hear like from the supplier side and from different levels. And I meant to say this earlier. Another big takeaway from me from this conference was like one of the two. There was one table that I hosted. We did three, right? One of the two, three. There were two women, believe it or not, older than me, had been even in the industry even longer, and they were really big on the fact of doing in-person live negotiations. And that was kind of
Mm,
like, wow, I kind of forgot about that because I work remotely and I'm a hybrid. I only go into DC once a month, and I was like, you know what? It is so powerful to remember being in person because we kind of got away from that with COVID, right? And it's now there's a lot of RTO and whatnot, but that really struck me personally. And now, some of my bigger negotiations, I'm like, you know what? I'm having these people come into DC and do it live versus trying to do it. So it's something so basic, but it really jumped out at me. So again, that's the biggest thing is you learn something every time you go. Don't be intimidated. It's a great conference.
love that. Love that. Owen, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to echo a lot of that. I think the group is really welcoming. So for first timers, don't be intimidated. I would say one thing I would recommend is the roundtables are a great time to get outside of your comfort zone. So go to a roundtable that is outside of what you traditionally are managing or doing. I think that is an awesome way to explore and get ideas that you can usually help with what you're working on. So I think that that's a great thing for first timers. And like Jen said, the group is really welcoming. You're not gonna say something that people are gonna go, it's just an open, great dialogue. So again, I would encourage first timers to go to this, and I'd encourage them to get outside of their comfort zone and visit roundtables that are outside of their expertise.
All right. Michelle, how about you?
Completely echo Owen. Be intentional about networking. I mean, you go to all these conferences, and this is the perfect opportunity to expand your network. You never know when you're going to need some help. When I came from two big companies that didn't have a breakfast background. And so all my network is in those companies. And when eggs went to $8 a dozen, I was so thankful that I had other breakfast concepts in my network that I met at supply
Yeah.
chain expert exchange that I could call and say, hey, what are you doing about this? So please just make the time of it. It's easy to show up, but make, just exchanging numbers just so you have that in case you ever need it, and vice versa, helping one another. Owen's right. We're all in this together, and we all love helping each other. That's why we're in this business. It's people business. So make the most of it.
That's a really good call out. It's not necessarily the connections that you're making in real time there and the meetings you're having there, but I think the book was already mentioned. This book is very powerful when you get back home and just reviewing as issues and concerns come up, just hitting your network with questions and bouncing off ideas. So I love that one. Great call out. Adam, how about you? What advice would you give to someone who hasn't been before, and any other final takeaways from your experience?
I believe the most important parts that I get value from, that I think a first timer or a newcomer should get from events like this, is really the relationship building with your manufacturers, but also your peers, as Michelle and Owen and Jen also alluded to. That relationship building, that face to face interaction is invaluable. A lot of people don't understand that there's also a drive for passion to be customer of choice, a kind of one of those key terms from history of past. But you want to be that customer of choice, and you can usually identify that by the relationship that you build with your partner suppliers and manufacturers, and that can save you in many different ways. One, just in when you're doing your negotiations, whenever you're running out of inventory, you need a production run, any of those scenarios, though, can lead into some healthy conversations that'll help you in your business, and success in your growth as you go through your supply chain career. I think that is probably one of the biggest things that I get out of it. And it is the networking, but the networking builds the relationships, and that's really why I attend it, so that way you can enjoy that development with peers across different industries.
Oh, it's so good. Sarah, how about you?
Well, I think it's all really been said.
Yeah.
But I do think for first timers, and especially the younger folks coming in, lean in and attend everything. Don't skip stuff. Make sure you're present, you're there. The roundtables, those are extremely invaluable. But participate. We are, as everybody mentioned, we are a friendly group. We are open arms, ready to help anybody who comes along and has a question ask. If we don't have the answer, we will get you in touch with somebody in our own network that knows. So we're not afraid to kind of extend that olive branch to anybody. But similar to kind of what everybody says, it's just staying connected year round, whether that's finding people in your peer group or the C-suite or whomever, suppliers, staying connected, finding people you can connect with, not just at the event, but year round, and keeping those connections, whether that's grabbing coffee or just shooting off an email, but making sure that you're nurturing those connections and keeping the conversations going, because again, that's what it's all about. It's all about relationships, and relationships rule at the end of the day. And we all know the industry we work in is a really small one, and you never know who you're going to meet, and how they're going to impact both your life and your career for the future.
And if I could just jump in real quick, I think one of the benefits of having market vision, at least in this fall one, is that in market vision, I was an ambassador for market vision. So I was tagged to help some of the newcomers into the show
Mm.
be introduced to people, networking. Are you focusing on something for your organization that you would like me to introduce you to?
Oh.
So part of that leaning in, and I also extend into the supply chain expert exchange. So if those individuals also attend the NRA side of the meeting, then I'm still there as a resource along with Michelle and any of the board, Owen, that you see here. We're all open arms to be able to help you do that networking. So
Mhm. That's true.
As you guys can hear, this year's exchange in particular had a really intentional structure. Speaker sessions in the morning, followed by breakout groups for solid collaboration, shepherding individuals at the event to make sure there's resources there on site to kind of support linking and connecting. And overall, we've heard it today, I mean, just the welcoming atmosphere. For those that are on this call, Jen, Owen, Michelle, Adam, and Sara, I cannot thank you enough, just with your busy schedules, to share your insights and just your passion for the industry, and specifically this year's event. It's been so great to hear how each of you are thinking about and even already applying what you heard at the event, to your career. So, for your listeners, thank you so much for listening and tuning in. We will include all resources in the show notes. And that's all. Thank you for listening. That's a wrap on this episode of Grounded. We've covered a lot of ground as we explored what it really takes to run food service behind the scenes. For show notes, highlights, and our latest market insights, visit us at groundedonthepod.com. Grounded is powered by the Buyer's Edge platform, delivering smarter solutions, greater efficiency, and real savings through connected tech, powerful data, and industry expertise. For more information and to get a personal demo of the Buyer's Edge platform, email me at lauren.mitchell@producealliance.com. And if you liked what you heard, subscribe so you don't miss an episode.